tuned in to The Andrew Lawton Show.
At its core, freedom of speech was one of the first casualties of the COVID era because you lost the ability to even really protest against what was happening. You couldn't get together and have a protest. If you worked in certain fields like law or medicine, were unable to speak up about your own opinion, even if it was rooted in your professional background. So it was very enthusiastic. It was I don't want to say I was excited to see it, but I was pleased, given the circumstances, to see so many doctors put out so many statements, even knowing what was likely going to await them in terms of the regulators cracking down. And I think it's created a bit of a movement of these dissident free speech loving doctors who have started to come together. And one of the fora in which they've done this is a conference in this idyllic part of Nova Scotia that is called, just to hit you on the head with the name, the Free Speech in Medicine Conference. And it's actually coming up this weekend, so I wanted to chat about it with the co-creator and organizer, Dr. Chris Milburn. Dr. Milburn, good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So just explain the genesis of this first off.
So free speech was a problem in medicine. It's been a problem in medicine over several decades. I think many people didn't recognize that was happening, but then suddenly COVID hit and it's like, oh, wow, doctors are really not allowed to say what they think. It was very obvious during COVID. In fact, our medical regulators in most provinces put out statements to the effect that all doctors are expected to be on board with all public health measures and are expected, like we were told in Nova Scotia, not to be, and they use the terminology, not to be anti-maskers or anti-vaxxers, i.e. don't criticize vaccines and don't criticize masks. We were explicitly told that in an email missive from our college. So it became very overt, the restrictions around free speech. But truthfully, the walls were closing in on free speech for several decades with things like you couldn't talk about what's your opinion as a physician? What do you think about the trans moment that we're in society? What do you think about harm reduction drug policy? All of these things had a right answer and a wrong answer. And you had to be very careful not to say the wrong thing publicly because there started to be consequences. Like myself, people can look at jccf.ca and if they Google Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms in Milburn, they'll hear about my case, which happened prior to COVID. I just wrote an op-ed and I used the word criminals in the op-ed, and apparently that's a very offensive word. So a left-wing mob came after me and they complained about me to the college, and I got dragged through the mud for a year behind the scenes just for writing an op-ed, which was broadly popular. A lot of people agreed with it. Some people disagreed. And then COVID, like I say, COVID hit, and myself and many other people ended up suffering consequences and losing opinions for daring to question the orthodoxy. So we just felt that it was time that we needed a venue to discuss all of those third rail nuclear waste topics that nobody wants to go anywhere near. So that's what free speech in medicine is about. It's a bug light for people who think that we need to hear both sides of issues.
To go to the status quo here, I think anyone that's followed along with what's happening to Jordan Peterson knows that regulators are very powerful, and the government has kind of done something quite insidious here. And I think maybe it started off with noble reasons, but they say, we're going to just outsource the regulation of these fields to the fields themselves. So it's, the lawyers that come together and deal with the law and make the law society. It's doctors that come together and make the medical colleges. And then the government kind of just takes its hands off them. But the problem is that these regulatory bodies are incredibly powerful. They're incredibly well staffed, and they obviously have this culture that is not prone to respecting free speech. But let me ask you if the culture that you see in the colleges is reflective of the culture you see broadly in your field, or if everyone else is looking around at each other thinking like you, but the college has just become this mammoth that is more powerful than its members.
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually one of the topics of discussion at the conference this weekend, we have a panel of lawyers who will be discussing the question, is it nature or nurture? Is regulation creating the political climate, or is the political climate creating the legislation? And I'd say to some degree that it's just a vicious circle. They feed on each other. So a bit of both. Certainly, the colleges have become very draconian, and as with many institutions, they've been kind of captured by the left-wing fringe. And there's this saying that if you're not explicitly conservative, then you will become very, very progressive, and that's
John
what's happened.
O'Sullivan's first law. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's happened with the colleges, certainly. So what we've seen inside the colleges is this, what I would say, a movement to have more and more wokeness embedded in the college. Like they put out missives about Black Lives Matter and all that, and kind of the standard boilerplate stuff that we see from all organizations now. But what's happened is they use this term professionalism, and I call it professionalism creep. It's my own term for it. Professionalism used to be, don't get drunk and scream at your patients. That's unprofessional. And if you did that, you would understandably be hauled onto the mat. But then professionalism became a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And now professionalism is, hey, you forgot to use the correct pronoun for somebody when referring to them in one of your reports, or you called somebody obese in your report. They're 320 pounds and 5'2", and you refer to them as obese. That's unprofessional. So professionalism has crept and crept and crept to, it now means if you offend anyone with anything you say, that's unprofessional. And since you're a doctor, we can regulate you. So it goes beyond, like when I wrote my op-ed, that had nothing to do with my day-to-day practice of medicine. The complaints weren't from people who I had ever seen as patients. It was just people who didn't like what I said, but they used the Medical Regulatory College as a bludgeon to hammer my political opinion back with. And colleges seem only too happy to oblige. I've never heard of anybody with an opinion that was too far left-wing for the colleges who they pursued, but there's all kinds of people with either centrist or opinions that could be considered conservative who they've gone after. Is that reflective of what's happening inside medicine? To some degree, yes. Medicine has become very feminized, and I don't mean just more females, but I mean feminized. So medicine used to be a bit of a cowboy free-for-all. You go out there, you work hard, you look after your patients the best you can, a bit of an individualistic, rugged kind of profession. And now it's guideline driven, and there's so much about physician wellness that we hear every day. And physician burnout, we're all burnt out. We all need to pay more attention to wellness. The volume of people we see is being cut down to take care of us better as a profession. So the profession has become
are those not real issues, though? Because I've heard from male doctors as well that have talked about just increasing workload over the years. I've never viewed those as being particularly gendered issues.
Yeah, true enough. But certainly anybody, either by statistics or by softer measures, we are a more feminized profession, for better and for worse. There's some good things that have happened with that. But ask a teacher if their job is easier now. Ask a lawyer. Ask a police officer. Ask anyone in a position of authority in Canada if they feel their job is easier or more stressful in 2023 than it was, say, in 1990. And everything's become more stressful. But doctors, I would say we like to feel particularly hard done by.
Fair enough. Let me then ask you about the kind of the road forward here, because I know that in Ontario, lawyers a few years back, and I know you have Lisa Bildy, who's speaking at your conference this year, who was instrumental in this, kind of did a hostile takeover of their law society. And they had some success. They organized around one specific issue. They had a little bit less success in their most recent election. But is something like that possible within medicine? Could you mount a hostile takeover of the colleges, or is it really not structured in a way where you could replicate what they tried to do in the law society?
It is not structured in that way. In theory, we have some say in who regulates us. In reality, we have no say. It's still unclear to me exactly how, for instance, the College of Physicians and Surgeons in Nova Scotia has a very bad reputation. If you talk to 20 doctors, you get 20 negative opinions. But how anybody would change that is beyond me. I don't think there's any way to do that. And unfortunately, because medicine in Canada, we are I'm not saying it's communist, but it's communist. It's completely government run, completely government regulated. Doctors are not independent practitioners who do their own thing, set their own fees, set up the way they want to practice. It's all very much regulated under the Canada Healthcare Act. So out of any profession, like law is the Wild West compared to medicine. I think this is a difficult issue. The woke infiltration of the law society is an issue. It's way worse and way harder to solve in medicine than it is in law.
You've got a fantastic lineup of speakers. I'm actually sorry I can't make it this year to report on it. You've got Kenneth Zucker and Amy Ham, who've been very front and center on the trans issue. You've got Lisa Bildy. You've got my colleague Rupa Subramanya. You've got Gad Sad. I mean, I'm just going through the list. You've got great names there, and I fear that all the issues that you and I have been talking about are keeping a lot of good people out of medicine. And I'm wondering if that's true. That you've heard even anecdotally, if people that have been looking at going to med school are kind of looking around saying, I don't want to be a part of this.
Absolutely. It's a problem, right? So just a little example. To get into medical school at Dal now, during COVID, they went to an online interview process because, you don't want to make anybody catch COVID. So there was an online interview, and you could record a video of your answer to the question, and you could record it and edit it and then finally send it when you're happy. And one of the questions was, how are you going to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion as a physician? And obviously, when you're trying to get into med school, you can go into med school and make lots of money, or you can go and do something else that'd be much less well paid. So people want to get in, and they know the right answer to that. The right answer is not, I don't think diversity and equity and inclusion is a priority for me. I think excellence is a priority, and I just want to give excellent care, and I want to be colorblind, and that is the wrong answer, and you will not get in. So I've talked to numerous young people, students who are considering medical school and have heard and know this because it gets around pretty quick, and they realize I can either act woke, which robs me of my soul, or I have to actually be woke. And those are the two choices. So it is going to drive good people out of medicine. And basically, we're going to have more and more and more of an ideological bent on the people who enter the field. And that's happening already. I definitely see that already. So,
do you anticipate this being an annual thing, or do you hope that you could actually make this conference obsolete in the next couple of years?
Oh, God, that's great. It would be lovely if we didn't need this, right? I have lots of other things I'd rather do. I live here in Cape Breton. I love kayaking. I love cutting a little bit of wood and sitting in front of my fire. But instead, we've been slaving away for 3 months trying to get ready for this conference. I would love to put myself out of business. Do I see that happening anytime soon? No. I think the trends for free speech in medicine are still, sadly, they're heading in the wrong direction, and there's a lot more work to do. Are we going to turn the tide? To some degree, there are a fair amount of doctors behind the scenes they come up to me in the mailroom, they make sure the door is shut and nobody's there, and then they'll say, Chris, I really like what you're doing, but I don't think I can really come to the conference, because they just don't want to be seen to be associated with this. So hopefully over the next few years, as more and more people are like, okay, this is crazy what we're doing, we have to do something about it. Hopefully more people will grow the courage necessary to speak out and to start to turn the tide. Not happening yet, but I'm hopeful that it will.
Yeah, don't doctors get like professional development credits or something for attending conferences? Do they get those at yours?
Yeah, not official. We couldn't get officially recognized as an educational event. We would have had to jump through all of the woke DEI hoops.
You would have had to have like started off with the land acknowledgement and put pronouns on the name tag and basically undermine it all, like you were just saying, right?
We don't meet the cut. We don't make the cut for that.
Yeah. Good. Well, that makes it all the worth. That's like real professional development right there. Screw the credits. You're going to learn a lot. All right. Let me just ask you, because I know a lot of people listening may be interested, maybe perhaps not this year, but for the future. Is it just for the medical field, or do you have kind of a layer outside of that of people that are just interested in the field?
No, not at all. So when people sign up, I ask them, it's voluntary, but I ask, what's your profession, what's your interest in the conference? We have everything from, lots of doctors, we have nurses, we have a strangely large number of dentists. We have psychologists, we have teachers, we have contractors, we have stay-at-home moms, we have you name the profession, we have some of them coming. So it's all over the map in terms of the people's background. The one thing that everybody has in common, their interest is they're afraid that they're not getting the whole balanced story on these difficult subjects: transgenderism, drug policy, the general issue of free speech. They don't feel that they're getting that both sides of the story, and they want to hear it. So the people we have are just above average in terms of their interest, their desire to dig into things and really find out. They're not just going to listen to CBC TV and formulate their opinion. They want to.
Well, yeah, I mean, when doctors' rights are suspended in this way, patients' rights are as well, because if your doctor can't speak their own mind, you as a patient are now denied the benefit of what would have happened had you heard that doctor's opinion. So very, very well said. Dr. Chris Milburn, one of the good ones, who's going to be assembling with the other good ones in Nova Scotia this weekend for the Free Speech in Medicine Conference. Hopefully we'll be able to check out a future one there. But Chris, thanks so much for coming on today. Have a good event.
Thank you very much for having me on, Andrew. I hope to see you soon.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.